Well, this morning, our scripture reading comes from the Gospel of Matthew in the second chapter, verses 1 through 12. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Well, then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. All right, my friends. Well, today is New Year's Day, and it is the day that we are celebrating Epiphany. And so I thought today I would share with you a story by Henry Van Dyke called The Other Wise Man. Have you heard this story? Well, you're in for a treat. So you know the story of the three wise men from the east, and how they traveled from far away to offer their gifts at the manger cradle in Bethlehem. But have you ever heard the story of the other wise man, who also saw the star in its rising and set out to follow it, yet did not arrive with his brethren in the presence of the young child Jesus? Well, here is his tale. You see, in the days when Caesar Augustus was master of many kings, and Herod reigned in Jerusalem, there lived in the city of Ecbatana, among the mountains of Persia, a certain man named Artaban. He was a tall, dark man of about 40 years, with brilliant eyes set near together under his broad brow. His robe was white, made of pure wool, thrown over a tunic of silk. A white pointed cap with long lapels at the sides rested on his flowing black hair. It was the dress of the Magi. On this particular night, Artaban welcomed in his home various friends of various ages, all Parthian nobles, alike in the richness of their dress of many-colored silks and in the massive holden collars around their necks. "Welcome," said Artaban in his low, pleasant voice as they entered. "You're all welcome, and my house grows bright with the joy of your presence." Seated at the end of a great room where the fire illuminated the space, revealing its simplicity and splendor, he addressed his guests. "You have come tonight at my call, and I thank you. Together, we have searched the secrets of nature and studied the healing virtues of water and fire and plants. We've also read the books of prophecy in which the future is dimly foretold in words that are hard to understand. Hear me now, as I tell you of a new light and truth that I feel certain will change our lives. You all know of Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. Their wisdom is unsurpassed. Together we have searched and studied, and we have seen a sign in the night sky. They are waiting for me at the temple, and together we will set out for Jerusalem to see and worship the promised one who's born the King of Israel. I have made ready for the journey. I have sold my house and my possessions and bought these 3 jewels, a sapphire, a ruby, and a pearl, to carry them as tribute to the king. I ask you to go with me on the pilgrimage, that we may have joy together in finding the prince who is worthy to be served." While he was speaking, he drew from his pocket 3 great gems, one blue as the fragment of the night sky, one redder than a ray of light at sunrise, and one as pure as the peak of a snow mountain at twilight. Artaban asked his friends to go on the pilgrimage with him in order that they might have joy together in finding the prince who is worthy to be served. One friend scoffed. "This is a vain dream." Another friend said, "I can't go. I'm guardian of the royal treasure, but fare you well." Still another said, "In my home sleeps a new bride. I cannot go either." Finally, his oldest and most loving friend said, "It is better to follow even the shadow of the best than to remain content with the worst. And those who would see wonderful things must often be ready to travel alone. Go in peace." When all his friends had gone, Artaban went out on the roof and observed the stars. As he watched, a steel blue spark was born out of the darkness beneath, tiny and infinitely remote, yet perfect in every part. "It's the sign," he said. "The king is coming, and I will go to meet him." And so it was before the birds had fully roused to their strong, high, joyful chant of morning song. The other wise man was in his saddle, riding swiftly along the high road. He and his horse rode for days toward the temple to catch up with his 3 friends he hoped to join on the journey. Well, on the night that he hoped to meet them, his horse sensed something by the road, and she gave a quick breath of anxiety and dismay and stood before a dark object in the shadow of a palm tree. Artaban dismounted. The dim starlight revealed the form of a man lying across the road. His humble dress and the outline of his haggard face showed that he was probably one of the poor Hebrew exiles who dwelt in great numbers in the vicinity. Should he turn aside, if only for a moment, from the following of a star to give a cup of cold water to a poor, perishing Hebrew? "God of truth and purity," he prayed, "direct me in the holy path, the wisdom of which only you know." So he brought water from a nearby canal and mixed a potent remedy. Hour after hour he labored. At last the man's strength returned. He sat up and looked around him. "I'm going to Jerusalem," said Artaban, "in search of the one who is reborn King of the Jews, a great prince and deliverer of all people." "I can tell you where the Messiah must be sought," said the Hebrew. "Not in Jerusalem, but in Bethlehem. May the Lord bring you safely to that place, because you have shown mercy to the sick." Well, Artaban set out again and finally reached the temple, but he could see no trace of his friends. They had left to find the king. They left him a note, hoping that he would catch up with them. "How can I cross the desert," said Artaban, "with no food and with a spent horse? I must return to Babylon, sell my sapphire, and buy a train of camels and provisions for the journey. I may never overtake my friends. Only God the merciful knows whether I shall not lose sight of the king because I tarried to show mercy." So he sold his gem and then ventured through the cruel desert, and eventually Artaban found Bethlehem. It was the 3rd day after the wise men had come to that place and found Mary and Joseph with the young child Jesus, and had laid their gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh at his feet. "I shall surely find him," said the other wise men, "though I be alone and later than my brothers. This is the place of which the Hebrew exile told me, that the prophets had spoken, and here I shall behold the rising of the great light." The street seemed deserted, and from the open door of a cottage, he heard the sound of a woman's voice singing softly, hushing her baby to rest. She told him of the strangers from the east who had appeared in the village 3 days ago, and how they had said that a star had guided him to the place where Joseph of Nazareth was lodging with his wife and their newborn child, and how they had paid reverence to the child and given him many rich gifts. But, she said, the travelers disappeared again as suddenly as they had come. And the man of Nazareth took the child and his mother and fled away that same night secretly. Ever since, there's been a spell upon the village. Something evil hangs over it. They say the Roman soldiers are coming to force a new tax from us. The young mother gave Artaban something to eat, but while they were dining, suddenly there was a shout from the street. The soldiers of Herod, they're killing our children. This was the murderous decree that Herod had demanded, the lives of children under 2 years of age, so that he might eliminate the baby king. Well, the young mother's face grew white with terror. She clasped her child tightly and crouched motionless in the darkest corner of the room, covering him with the folds of her robe, lest he should wake or cry. Well, the soldiers found Artaban standing in the door. And Artaban said, I'm all alone in this place, and I'm waiting to give this jewel to the prudent captain who will leave me in peace. He showed the ruby glistening in the hollow of his hand. The captain was amazed at the splendor of the gem, so he reached out his hand and took the ruby. March on, he cried to his men. There is no child here. The house is empty. Artaban prayed, God of truth, forgive my sin. I have said the thing that is not to save the life of a child. 2 of my gifts are gone. Shall I ever be worthy to see the face of the king? But the voice of the woman weeping for joy in the shadow behind him said very gently, because you have saved the life of my little one, may the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Well, Artaban then traveled on to Egypt, seeking everywhere for this king. Crowded cities, at the foot of the pyramids, and even looking up into the face of a crouching sphinx. He found himself in an obscure house of Alexandria taking counsel with a Hebrew rabbi. The Messiah, read the rabbi from a parchment, will be despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Those who seek him will do well to look among the poor and the lowly, the sorrowful and the oppressed. So Artaban traveled from place to place. He visited the oppressed and the afflicted in the gloom of subterranean prisons and the crowded wretchedness of slave markets and the weary toil of galley ships. Though he found none to worship, he found many to help. He fed the hungry and clothed the naked and healed the sick and comforted the captive. And his years passed more swiftly than the weaver's shuttle that flashes back and forth through the loom, while the web grows and the pattern is completed. Well, my friends, 33 years of the life of Artaban had passed away, and he was still a pilgrim and a seeker after the light, worn and weary and ready to die, but still looking for the king. He came for the last time to Jerusalem. It was the season of Passover. The city was thronged with foreigners, so Artaban joined a group of people from his own country, Parthian Jews who had come to keep the Passover, and acquired of them the cause of the tumult and where they were going. We are going, they said, to the place called Golgotha, where there is to be an execution. 2 famous robbers are to be crucified, and with them another called Jesus of Nazareth, a man who has done many wonderful works among the people so that they love him greatly. Pilate has sent him to the cross. Those words felt strangely familiar to Artaban. They were the words that had led him a lifetime over land and sea, hoping to finally offer his third and last gift of the precious pearl to the king, he ventured on. But just then, a troop of soldiers came dragging a young girl down the street. She was, she said, daughter of a merchant of Parthia, but her father was dead, and she was being sold as a slave to pay his debts. "Have pity on me and save me." Artaban trembled. It was the old conflict in his soul, which had come to him in the palm grove of Babylon and in the cottage in Bethlehem. The conflict between the expectation of faith and the impulse of love. Twice the gift he had consecrated to the worship of religion had been drawn to the service of humanity. This was the third trial, the final and irrevocable choice. Was it his great opportunity or his last temptation? He could not tell. One thing only was clear. It was inevitable. And does not the inevitable come from God? And was not the deed of love what he must do? So he took out the pearl from his sack. Never had it seemed so luminous, so radiant, so full of tending, living luster. And he laid it in the hand of the slave. "This is your ransom, daughter. It is the last of my treasures, which I have kept for the king." Just then came an earthquake, and falling to the ground, Artaban knew that the quest was over, and it had failed. But even in that thought, there was peace. He knew that all was well. He had done the best that he could from day to day, and been true to the light that had been given him. He knew that even if he could live his life over again, it could not be otherwise than it had been. Then there came a voice through the twilight, very small and still, like music sounding from a distance, in which the notes are clear but the words are lost. The girl he had helped turned to see if someone had spoken from the window above them, but she saw no one. Then the old man's lips began to move as if to answer, and she heard him say, "Not so, my lord, for when did I see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did I see you an alien and take you in, or naked and clothed you? When did I see you sick or in prison and come to you? 33 years I have looked for you, but I have never seen your face, nor ministered to you, my king." The sweet voice came again, faint and far away, but now it seemed as though she understood the words. "Truly I say to you, inasmuch as you have done it to the least of these, of my brothers or sisters, you have done it to me." A calm radiance of wonder and joy lighted the pale face of Artaban like the first ray of dawn on a snow mountain peak. A long breath of relief exhaled gently from his lips. His journey had ended. His treasures were accepted. The other wise man had found the king. Amen.